All right, hi everybody, this is John Durish. We're going to talk about how to play with Kydex. Before we get into playing with Kydex, I'm going to talk about the safety involved with Kydex. First and foremost, good leather gloves. You will usually not have a flat piece of Kydex. You will usually want to heat it, and if you're going to do that, you need to have gloves. You can burn yourself with hot Kydex. When you pick your gloves, I recommend picking a pair of gloves that gives you good dexterity. If you get anything too stiff, you're not going to be able to do some of the finite things you want to do. So either have a pair that are really broken in, or make sure you buy some good doe skin or pigskin leather gloves that are very dexterous, because you're going to be doing some fine things with your fingers as you try to heat it. For this piece tonight, not so much, but for other things, you may find yourself really going, oh, I can't mess with this because my gloves aren't letting me, and now I've got a problem. And I discovered that the hard way by using gloves that are too thick and sometimes even oven mitts, and that was just overkill and didn't work out. A simple pair of gloves like this, leather gloves, is totally adequate. All right, so the next thing, Kydex is safe, air quotes, when you heat it up. When you look at the chemical composition, it's not that particularly bad, but regardless, you will put off some fumes if you're messing with Kydex. So wear a mask. We're already wearing a mask anyhow. Wear a mask. Something over your face. Bandana, I don't care, but put on a mask. Next, when you're messing with Kydex, you're going to be messing with sharp tools, and the Kydex itself is sharp. These are little chips that result from some of the cutting I do, and also make sure they don't get in your carpet or on your floor. These things will stick in your skin, and they'll stick in the bottom of your feet. And there are times where you'll cut Kydex, you might actually make a chip that has got a very onerous point to it. Sorry, one quick, let me get off camera. You might find yourself cutting in such a way that you have a sharp point like that, and that lays around somewhere. That's a bad day. I do not want that anywhere near my foot. So make sure you're mindful of your chips, and make sure you're wearing gloves to protect yourself from the tools and the Kydex itself. As far as chips go, and also when cutting, I prefer a Dremel, and that is a high-speed instrument. But if you're not using that, it may not be such a concern. But if you're using any kind of power tool that may cause chips to fly, or the tool itself could have fractures, and I'll talk about that in a bit, make sure you've got some kind of glasses on. I personally wear glasses. I'm blind, so I generally get away with just wearing my glasses. But if I'm doing anything particularly heavy duty, I will get something a little more sturdy in front of my face. So please have glasses. And finally, the tools that I use tend to put off a lot of finite particles, and you'll see that in a bit when I actually get into the work. And same thing again, a mask and some glasses to protect yourself. If you get done and later you go to blow your nose and you've got little black particles in your nose, that has also gone in your lungs. So be mindful that some of the things I'm going to show you tonight will generally generate very fine particles of plastic. And while I believe the chemical composition of the plastic is not that dangerous, you still do not want that stuff in your body. So please take a mind to that. Before I move on from safety, does anybody have any questions about safety? Awesome. Moving along. Kydex. What is Kydex? Marlene, what is Kydex?
Plastic?
Yes, I'm going to quote Wikipedia. It is a thermoplastic acrylic polyvinyl chloride with a hardness of 90 in the Rockwell R scale. And it was originally produced in the 1960s for aircraft interiors, and is now made by a company, Kisui SPI, out of Pennsylvania. So when you hear Kydex, that brand name is actually a company. Going back to the prior question, there are definitely different thicknesses you can get. This is a nice big old sheet of 0.80. It's my preferred. You can go as thin as 0.6, and me showing you this on the camera doesn't say anything to you, but trust me, this is a lot thinner and easier to bend. By comparison, this is a bigger sheet, but it is thicker by 0.02 inches. For most applications in HEMA, I recommend 0.08. You can use 0.06 for some applications, but bear in mind, it is not really going to protect you much unless you really layer it up. I've done a couple things with 0.06, haven't been happy with them, but 0.08 is a great number. They also do sell 0.1. It is thicker, but in my book, it is too thick. A little while ago, I helped Joe Lilly craft a sheet of 0.1 thickness, and that was a bear to work with. largely because of the size of the piece we were working, and just getting to do what I wanted to do was very difficult. After tinkering a lot, I have found that for the things we do in HEMA, not for making sheaths, not for making holsters, but for what we do in HEMA, 0.080 inches is the best. And the easiest place I've found to get this is on Amazon. They're not paying me to say that. I've shopped around. I just order off of Amazon and I can get a couple sheets and generally get a good price. I do recommend, if you get into this, that you just go ahead and buy the 12-inch by 24-inch sheets. It's a lot more forgiving and it gives you a lot more to tinker with, and it's cheaper too in the long run. But if you're just going to maybe get into it, buy smaller. But I do recommend a 12-inch by 24-inch sheet. So that's about Kydex. I'm going to talk a bit about other materials you're going to have for your project. But before I move on, does anybody have any questions? Because I'm going to run through a laundry list of things. Any questions about Kydex itself? No? Good. And there's also Google, Wikipedia. Okay, so besides the actual Kydex, here's some critical things you need to have. One of the first things you want to have is a template. Now, I personally make my templates out of simple paper. I can generally eyeball a thing and look at it and go, it needs to be about this big, and I will just use flat paper. What I do recommend, though, is using something such as a cereal box. This cardboard is very easy to play with, it's very easy to cut, and you can do things like slap tape on it, and you can run around like a cardboard warrior and wrap this in your arm and go like, oh, look at me, I'm fighting now. I wouldn't hit this with a sword, but it lets you get an idea of the shape of things that you want to make. So have something like this on hand. I do recommend that kind of cardboard, because if you try to use something like your corrugated cardboard from a box, folding it and getting to behave the way you want to mimic Kydex can be onerous, and it can behave in ways that don't actually mimic what you're trying to do for your project. So I don't actually recommend cardboard this thick when trying to make templates. But like I said, I've gotten a pretty good amount of experience with this net by now, and I generally will just take some line paper and sort of eyeball what I want to do, and I'll just make a shape. But initially, I was generally using some kind of cardboard to make my templates. Another great easy one is your manila folders or your school folders. Those are great material. The other thing I like to combine with Kydex is this stuff here, this floor mat. This is the kind of stuff you put under a treadmill or some kind of a workbench in your shop. And I got a roll of it for about, I don't know, about 10 bucks a couple years ago, and I'm finally like on the last bit. I've used so much of this stuff, and I love it to death, mainly because one of the great things about it is you can sew through it. I can get a needle through here pretty easily. I'm gonna do this at the corner because I'm actually gonna use this piece, but I can get a needle through there pretty easily. And as long as I'm careful, it will not actually tear. And when I use it in combination with Kydex and the projects and the way I do it, this will not tear. If you're not careful though, if you try to put too much stress in this, you could actually make a piece of equipment that if it had too much shearing on it, you could tear this. So be mindful of that this will not bear a load in terms of making something that you would not make this into a strap that you would like hang armor off of. But this is great. And additionally, I personally feel, I can't prove this from an engineering point of view, but I think this stuff in combination with Kydex does a fantastic job of ablating damage. It's not non-Newtonian, but it works really good for slowing down some damage. Besides that, yes, go ahead.
So that's basically supposed to be used for cushioning underneath the Kydex itself, right?
Right,
effectively?
right. So really quickly, let me try to power through this. This is my more finished design. Sorry, one second. And this goes inside this leather sheath here. And the great thing about this is that it is suspending my Kydex, and it's also rolling in a way that it now goes neatly over my arm. And this area doesn't have Kydex right here, but that's the inner part of my arm. The rest of this has a nice layer of Kydex and this material, and in combination with this leather sheath, also has this other added effect for HEMA because we fence and we don't like to have our judges hear every hit. This also deadens some of the sound as opposed to hitting on loud plastic. So there's a bit of a gamemanship going on here too. This is a little bit quieter as well. So leather, matting, Kydex, and then of course my Spez jacket inside of all this. This works really well. I've taken some very stout hits on this design, and I'm very happy with it.
Is that leather just from a glove, John?
I'm going to talk to that. It absolutely is, but I want to. I talked to that a bit in design because that's
Cool.
how that came up is kind of cool.
Okay.
Okay. So next, foam. There's all kinds of foams out there. You can buy some expensive non-Newtonian foam. This foam comes from the inserts in most of the Spez pants and Spez jackets. I just have some extra. I like this kind of stuff, but I don't generally use it too much because it's a little bit on the thick side. But some foam is a nice extra friend to keep you from getting hurt. Other materials you're going to want to have on hand as you get into your crafting project is some kind of thread. You can get some fake sinew, you can some wax thread, but frankly, my favorite thing for all kinds of stuff is just good old dental floss. Dental floss is incredibly strong, particularly the ribbon floss. And when you sew with it, and you sew with it enough layers, you actually get a very strong surface. And if you,
How fun is that?
it's I learned this a long way back before HEMA, and good Lord, I just lost my thing. Where did I put it? Oh, if you look, these Kydex pieces are sewn on with dental floss. And the main thing though is they are not in a position to be hit once they're inside the leather. So when you sew, bear in mind that if you use sewing for your project, that if it gets hit, it will easily cut your threads. And I've done a lot of projects like these gloves, and if I can find one spot where you can see where the string, if you can see the string is very frayed, and all it takes is one hit and that string just pops off. I think actually I re-sewed a lot of these strings, but this is actually a bad design flaw because this exposes the string to impacts. So if you are going to sew for your project, protect it. A simple trick is to actually take a small square of duct tape and put it right on top of it. But on the outside, maybe kind of ugly, may fall off, but on the inside, totally legit to put a small bit of duct tape just to cover that. I didn't feel it was necessary for this one, but for other things, I will generally put a little bit of duct tape right on there. You can do some glue too, but duct tape's easy. Just don't have to wait for the dry either. You can move along a lot faster. Another thing, good Lord, I already lost it, is shock cord. I've used a lot of things to tie these kits together, but I found that shock cord is my personal favorite. If you look at your Spez gloves, you'll see that tying the glove onto the plastic onto the leather glove. And the other thing is most shock cord sort of has a very frictiony kind of surface. So when you go to tie it, that elastic action and the friction really works together to make a knot that is just generally not coming open. It will come open on you, but it really prevents that. I also definitely recommend becoming a connoisseur of elastic straps at Michaels. I have some other more fangly things I use, but elastic strap is a common thing at Michaels, but bear in mind that this is a rough sport, and if you use anything that's too lightweight, it won't last very long. And that's largely why those gloves fell apart, was because I bought some lightweight stuff from Michaels. I don't generally use leather. I use leather for some projects, but when you look at what you're trying to do with the context of HEMA, unless you're doing harness fectin, I don't recommend leather. I just can't recommend it. There's some great leather armor out there that people have made that's just absolutely beautiful and stunning to look at. But in combination with Kydex, I do not recommend leather straps. I do not recommend leather shoelaces. I've found these things to generally fail a little faster than they should. That's why I do recommend things like this shock cord instead. And finally, with Kydex, if you go to buy Kydex, one of the things that Amazon is say, hey, do you want to buy rivets too? Don't. Do not buy rivets. Do not use rivets with Kydex. I have found a million different rivets on tournament floors. It's a hazard. You can step on it and your stuff falls apart. I have not seen a rivet yet that works for Kydex. If you're riveting metal and it's armor metal, yeah, knock yourself out, but not for Kydex. I do not recommend that.
Also, one of the things that Charles has to replace the most on his.
Yes, rivets fall out on anything, and this has become my favorite thing. I try to make this my central piece in any design feature that I'm doing. When I'm looking at how I'm going to do a thing, I try to look at how do I use this to make what I'm doing happen. Okay, I'm going to move on to tools. I've gone for about 30 minutes and I haven't done a single cut yet. So are there any questions about the materials? Because I'm going to get into tools next.
Yes, bring out the tools.
Tools, okay. First and foremost, this is my friend. This is about an $80 Dremel tool. It's got a variable speed on it. I cannot recommend a Dremel tool more for anybody that remotely is going to do crafting. I use this to do woodworking. I've used this to install doors. I use this much more often than I use many tools that I own. This thing is a beast of a thing, and I definitely recommend a good Dremel for any crafting endeavor. So that's the premise of everything we say past this is largely centered around a Dremel as a key tool set. You can use other tools. I just highly recommend a Dremel. Corded ones will give you better power. I do not like the rechargeable ones. They just don't seem to do it for me. But if you find one out there that you like, then let me know. Maybe I'll change my mind. You're going to have quite a few bits. I'm going to talk just about a couple that I use for my projects. Sorry, real quick. Good Lord. There it is. Nope, that's not it. I lost it. Don't worry about it. When I first started using the Dremel, I had this nice lovely saw bit, and I'll show you how I use this in a bit. But my favorite these days is this little guy right here. It's a diamond dust coated little spinning wheel. It goes through Kydex like butter, but it also creates an incredible amount of fine particles. So that is why I was saying earlier, make sure you've got a mask on. And when I get done, I'm gonna probably be able to wipe up the table and you're gonna see my hand is gonna be covered in a lot of fine particles. The great thing about this bit though, is it is small and it really does a good job of conserving your material you're cutting. Very common when I would cut Kydex, I would have to overcut past and I would cut more away than I want to. So having a smaller wheel is better, and it's actually easier to control because it transforms more of the energy of the tool into the cutting action. So smaller is better. Bigger, it's going to go through, but you may have some safety problems because it can catch a little more easy and it can torque, it can really pull. So bigger is not necessarily better in this case.
How long do one of these last for?
I've had this guy for a while.
Okay.
I don't know. If you misuse it and you try to cut something you shouldn't cut with it, it won't last a minute. But I have been cutting Kydex with this little guy, and it has not given up yet. It's
okay.
Crazy.
Have you noticed any dulling of it whatsoever?
So if you look, it's hard to see, but on the very edge, I can see the diamond is kind of coming off the very edge there, but I did have another one that I used, and I tried to cut the wrong thing. I think I tried to cut some metal with it. I was like, let me try metal, and then nope. The other thing that people commonly use are things like these large spalling wheels, but it says for metal, do not use this on Kydex.
Okay.
These will shatter on you dramatically when you're doing metal. They will shatter on you more dramatically when you're doing them on Kydex, because the Kydex will get hot, it'll catch the edge, and the torque of the tool will rip it apart. And even if you're wearing glasses, there are plenty of pictures on the internet of people getting pieces of these in their face. This is for metal. So okay. I have these. I do not use this for what I'm about to show you. I also will use things like this for rounding holes on occasion, but that's when I'm being lazy. I don't know if you can see that very well, but it's like a little pear-shaped thing. It's a bit
it's like sandpaper, right? It kind of just...
It's actually metal ridges. The one you're thinking is more like this. This is actually a sanding wheel.
Ah, okay.
This will not work on Kydex. It will actually just overheat the Kydex, and the Kydex will actually stick to this. If you're going to try to mess with your holes and make your holes a little more smooth, you can use this, but I'm going to show you a technique later that you don't need this guy, but you can try it if you'd like.
Okay.
Okay, so that's Mr. Dremel. And also, I'm sorry, one last point real quick. Also a drill bit. I generally use a very simple drill bit like this. I'm not sure what size this is, but the big point is it is easily 4 times bigger than any needle I'll use, and I'll explain why that's later, but the short version is don't try to sew through a tiny hole. It's a nightmare. I've tried that. you're not saving yourself any, you're really not saving anything. Do not try to use a tiny hole and try to sew through it with Kydex. It's not worth the time. I'm sorry, your question? Hello?
No, I think
Question?
we just had some background noise.
Okay. Okay, moving on. Next is snips. These are hobby snips. There's a whole bunch of different snips out there, but I love these to death. When I'm cutting Kydex, it's very common that I won't cut as close as I wanted to, and these guys will go right through Kydex real easy. I can't cut a big long line. That's not what this is for. But if I want to round a piece off, like if I want to make, I don't know, a Kydex button or something like that, I can cut these off. But bear in mind, you are making these tiny little sharp bits here, so be mindful of that. But these little guys here are very comfy, and you can find these in basically any hobby store out there. Usually about 10, 15, 20 bucks on the high end. You can use large, like tin snips to cut Kydex. I don't recommend it. It's very headachy, and a lot of times what you'll do is you wind up cutting a large piece and having to cut a bunch off. It's one way to get around using a power tool, but honestly, if you want to get into this kind of stuff, a Dremel's your friend, man. It really is. There's so many things you can do with this guy. I have done a billion different things with the Dremel tool. It's cool. Okay. Additionally, another way to cut Kydex, believe it or not, is with just a razor, an X-Acto knife, and this goes back to using gloves. I've cut myself so many times I accept the risk, but wear gloves. But believe it or not, I can take this razor and score a line just like that, and I can bend the Kydex and I can snap it. I did not press down that hard. This is 0.080 Kydex. I went through maybe a fourth of the way into the material with that razor, and I just bent it once and snapped it. It does not take a lot to break the structural integrity of Kydex in a way that you can actually do something like that. So it is possible to like trace some kind of shape and try to pop it out. You're just gonna have a bad long day. It's possible. Another technique that people use, I've seen, and I've done it too, is you drill a bunch of tiny little holes, you know, just like in movies where you see like they shoot a machine gun and they shoot around a target, and then the guy falls to the wall, or like in Fifth Element where Bruce Willis got Ruby Rod out of that second level balcony. That's one way to do it. It's tedious, but it will work. But a razor will help you out. What a razor is for, though, is for shaving off things you don't quite like. You want to change the thing just a bit, and don't cut like me, I'm a dummy, but just doing that, I can just gently shave away. Just be mindful of how you cut with the razor. Please don't copy me though in that one. Cut away from yourself, kids, cut away. But I'm dumb like this, and honestly, I do find this way has more control, but I've got a bit of experience cutting things, so just please be careful of some of the things you may see me do kind of mindlessly. Okay, heating. Yes, go ahead.
I had some thoughts. Is that okay that I share them?
Yeah.
I use metal shears to cut my Kydex.
Yeah, it absolutely. I've done that. It's for the pieces I like to do, I find it to be a little problematic, and that's why I like using the Dremel tool. But I have a pair of metal snips, and you can just plow through it. But I would argue that you cannot get the same degree of control turning a corner that you can with the Dremel tool. I've tried, and you can do a big old piece and really cut, like you can take like a big old piece of Kydex and cut like a pretty big arc. But if you really want to tuck in and cut a tight arc, it's really hard to do with a pair of shears. And a Dremel can be scary, and that's what I really want to focus on. Is I want to show you how to cut with a Dremel, because once you learn how to do it, it's a lot of fun and it's really easy. But yes, as metal shears will absolutely work. You're absolutely right.
Thank you.
So heat. All right. This is just your basic Wagner paint stripping gun. It's got 2 settings, high and low. I forget what the temperature is. I don't care. Also, if you go onto Google and you Google like, how hot do I have to get Kydex to heat it? There's all kinds of math out there. I don't care. What I found is the heat that you want is basically above candle heat, and you want to heat your Kydex in a controlled way, and that's why I like using a heat gun like this. Do not use an oven. Unless that oven is something that you do not eat out of, or you maybe have it outside. When I first started doing this, I would use just the oven in the kitchen. Bad idea. It gets all kinds of fumes, and you're getting fumes into where you prepare food. Just a bad idea. Just don't do it. Additionally, this rig right here I've got set up, this is not how I normally do this. I usually actually hang my gun from a little hook I've got back in my workshop. But key thing though is make sure that however you have your heat gun, that it's stable, because it's very easy that you might drop it, knock on the floor, and if you're fumbling around to pick it up, you could damage an area, and worse, you might get it on yourself somehow and burn yourself. So to make sure when you're playing this guy that you've got it nice and stable. But don't do this at home, kids. This is high heat. That's about as close as I can get my hand and tolerate it. And I would not recommend keeping your hand there very long. This thing will get very hot very quickly. If I were to put my finger right about there, I'm gonna have a bad day in about a second. So this is what I was saying earlier. You've got to have gloves on. And even then, as you're playing the Kydex, you will start to get uncomfortable. So have your gloves, folks. This is like a $30 heat gun from Home Depot. If you really want to know which model I have, ask me later. I just couldn't tell you. It's a Wagner heat gun. I'm not sure what heat it goes up to. Basic model 050-331-72. Yeah, it's got 2 heat settings, so it's probably got a hot and a cooler setting.
Have you tried using an embossing gun at all? Like
I've seen them. I don't emboss. I have this one. I'm not sure of the heat on one of those. I imagine it is pretty hot. I just couldn't tell you off the top of my head. What I would say is probably, if you want to really know, Google Kydex temperatures. But my preferred is this guy right here, just because I also use it for things besides embossing, such as peeling paint.
dripping paint.
Yeah. So here's a key point. Like everything I'm showing you tonight, my tools generally have more than one use. Like every tool I'm going to go through has more than one use. I don't have these tools because of Kydex. I accrued some of these because I was doing Kydex, but every tool I have, I also do something else with. So that's another key thing there. I don't like specialty tools. I'm not a fan of it. I can help it. You can actually get away with a candle to do spot shaping. It is tricky, but believe it or not, just a candle, you can heat the little spot of Kydex and just carefully bend it. Just be aware that it will have a tendency to burn, so watch how close you're going to the candle. Do not put it directly in the flame. But my point there is, that's how easy it is to shape Kydex. A candle will actually heat Kydex enough that you can do some minor shaping. Not a big project like I'm going to do, but some minor shaping. Okay, so that's heat. Yes, go ahead.
Do you ever use a toaster oven?
So this little small like convection ovens, like little pull down door, absolutely. But if I was not going to eat out of it, so
yeah.
Eventually, if I have a forge, I'm going to have a forge out back. I'm going to have that kind of thing for curing my knives and that kind of thing. But I would only use it for work projects like this. I would not use it for food and work projects. So yes, a small convection stove, absolutely fine. But I will say they're generally small. So if you want to do a larger piece, you're kind of limited. And that's why I like the heat gun. Additionally, the other great thing about the heat gun is it allows me to only heat part of the Kydex. If you put it in an oven, the whole thing's getting hot. And you might have this thing that's all floppy everywhere. You're going to see in a bit how floppy Kydex gets. And you don't always want that, particularly for projects like this. I did a lot of intricate folding, and I would heat, fold, heat, fold, heat, fold. And if you put Kydex in an oven, it's going to heat the entire thing up, and it's going to go flat. So to get the effect I get, heat gun. I can't stress that. You can use an oven, but just bear in mind you're going to run into some problems. But when I first got started, I was using an oven, and I did some stuff that was really cool, but it just was a little more tedious. Heat gun saves you some trouble. Even then, the heat still gets out of control. All right, moving on. Other marker. if I'm using black, I prefer to use red. If you're colorblind or something like that, you might want to get like a white marker or something like that. But have a marker on hand for marking where you're going to cut. Sandpaper. Sanding is a common thing. If I'm doing a lot of work, I'll use this little mouse sander, but I can just use a sheet of sandpaper. But if I need to do so much sanding that I'm actually going to sand, I'll get this out. What I prefer over sanding, however, is tools like this. I can actually take this little guy right here, this X-Acto knife, and use the back edge, the square edge, and I can smooth out the edge. I don't know if you can see that, but I'm curling up a little bit of the Kydex. And this allows me to get a nice smooth edge. So I can pull really hard, or I can use this, and then I can use this square edge, the back edge, and I can smooth that edge and make it a little smoother. Why do you want to make it smooth? Because Kydex comes with sharp edges, and it will cut you, and it will cut your cloth, it will cut your thread, all that jazz. My favorite thing to use, though, is this little guy. This is a hobby tool. This one's made by Games Workshop. It's just a bit of carbide that is square on all sides. It's used for when you build a plastic model and you cut it off, you want to clean up the little extra bits of flash, the little extra plastic off. It's got a nice curved shape, so you can do that. I love it because I can hold this guy and I can just go to town. And additionally, I have to try really hard to cut myself with this. I can cut myself, but I have to try to cut myself.
Well, you can do the thing you're doing.
Yep. This is my favorite little guy. Additionally, the way you can hold it, it allows me to really save my hands. So this guy, not so much. This is made for people that are doing a lot of hobby work, and for 16 bucks, if you're getting into Kydex, this is the only thing I'd recommend buying that would be like specially for Kydex. But I didn't buy this for Kydex. I bought this for assembling little plastic army men, and I was like, hey, will this work at Kydex? Sure enough, it does, and it works like a champ. And I love this guy. If you want to know what it is exactly, just ask me later, and I'll give you a link for it. All right, moving on. Another thing you want to have is a form. For tonight's project, I'm going to use a jar. It's the right shape, and if you look at the diameter of it, it's about the diameter of my arm inside of a Spez jacket. So that's my form tonight. I have also made forms out of wood. I have used all kinds of things for forms. I've used markers just to sort of like, get the right bend. But most shapes you're going to do in HEMA are going to be organic ones that cover your body, and that's why I recommend this kind of shape right here. It's about the diameter of most things you'll do that'll cover up an area you want to protect, particularly your arms or your legs. But you might want to experiment with that if it's maybe a less sharp angle that you're trying to get. As I said a bit ago, needle and thread, be ready with that, be ready to go. Leather needles work great, but I've used tiny little needles too, but when I want to push through something like that hard rubber mat, I prefer a nice thick upholstery needle for that kind of stuff. And you can get those at Michael's in little kits like this for pretty cheap. And this is also great for all kinds of things in HEMA, like sewing patches on your jackets. Just kind of hard. I will also generally, on occasion, find myself needing some clamps for holding things together. You can get C-clamps, but I honestly just use these little guys all the time. Generally, most things I'm doing with Kydex, this is totally adequate, is a couple of clamps like this. And for really big ones, you may have like a lot of these, but generally a couple are just fine. The last material you're going to have, and this is a laundry list of things, is you want to be ready to clean. You're going to find yourself with a lot of fine dust and particles. You're going to be able to sweep things up. You do not want these little chips getting all over the place and wind up in the carpet. So have a vacuum cleaner on hand, have a rag, and have some place you can sweep your little bits off into, like a garbage bag right at your feet. So be mindful of your cleaning, and I recommend having a way to clean as you work, because it'll save you some time later, and it also just sort of gives you a break to think about what you're doing and clean instead. Okay, so that's materials. We're going to get on to the actual work now. We're definitely pretty deep into it, and I haven't made a single thing yet, so I'm going to really speed up. Anybody got any questions about the materials? Because now I'm going to really just roll through how we actually get about making this thing. I know I'm talking a lot, sorry. Okay, project design and creating templates. One of the key things you want to do is make sure that you're very clear about what you're trying to make and why you're trying to make it and how you're making it. Very often I'll wear my jacket as I do this process. I've got an older son that the jacket fits on. I'll make him come here and be a mannequin, but I will make sure I'm using my baseline item, mask, gloves, jacket, whatever, and I've got that at hand as I do my template and designing. Again, ideally you want to use a material that is about the same gauge as your Kydex, but I get away with using paper because I've been doing it for a bit, but definitely use something that's got your gauge as your Kydex. I will generally make something and wear it around for a bit just to see how it fits. And I will try to draw inspiration from whatever I have at hand, and I'll try to find shortcuts. And Marlene, back to your question. Yes, this is from a rose glove. My mom gave me these because she was like, hey, you're doing a lot of yard work. And I looked at him like, wait a minute. That goes neatly over a Spez jacket. I cut the glove off. I'm like, sorry, Mom, this is getting used for HEMA. And I'm like, oh, here we go, game on. And from there, this became the foundation for my design. So my point there being, whatever you're trying to make, find efficiencies, find things that work, and try to draw inspiration from things that you have around. What I will say is try to draw not too much inspiration from things like fantasy armor and all that. Try to draw inspiration from actual armor. But what we're doing in HEMA is not harness fectin unless you're doing harness fectin. So really try to think about what you're trying to do relative to the project at hand, relative to how you're going to fight. If you make yourself into Mr. Plastic looking like Iron Man, it might look cool, but you might have a lot of parts that'll fall off and it might be a lot of work for nothing. I only do the parts that I need to protect. One of the key goals when you're making your templates is you want to measure twice and cut once. A very common pitfall people get into is they make a template, they cut it, and then they cut the Kydex, and next thing you know, it doesn't fit. Particularly with curved pieces, if you have the wrong diameter, and then you go and you make this template, and you make it too small, and you cut your Kydex, and you heat it and shape it, you're gonna go like, oh, this was too small, and I'm only covering that much area now. So really have a strong mind to measuring multiple times to get an idea for what you're trying to do. This is just like tailoring. Really, if you have to measure big, because it's a lot easier to shave away extra material with Kydex than it is to put it back, because I can't put it back once I cut it off. Lastly, when it comes to designing, template. Try to, if you can, do one and do the other. So for example, I made one arm, and now I'm gonna make the other one. So I already have this one left arm, and I like it, and I fought in for a bit, and now I'm gonna make the right arm. So if possible, just do one and then do the other. Some projects won't let you do that, but if you can, just do one before you do the other. Any questions about prototyping? That's a very esoteric set of concepts. It's just the art of design. You just try to come up with the best thing you can. I'm missing my template. Oh my God. Sorry, 1 second, folks. All right.
We're good on time, John, so I don't feel like you need to rush.
I'm on page 1. Okay. Not quite. Okay, marking Kydex. So once you've got your template, and I'll go ahead and mark the other guy here just to show you what I'm going to do. So once you get your template, if you want to be nice and careful, go ahead and tape it down, but I can generally just do it by hand. And it's maybe hard to see, but all I'm going to do is I'm going to conserve as many straight edges as I can. So it's a straight edge, and I'm just going to go ahead and sort of draw sloppily. I don't care if I go on the paper, because I actually want to keep, oops, I shifted it just a smidge. I want to keep the line as tight to the paper as possible. So by going on the paper, keeping as close to the template as possible. A little sloppy, that's okay. When I go to cut it, not that worried about it. But hope you all enjoyed watching me draw a line with a red marker, because that's what that just happened. And I don't know if you can see that too well, but there's your red line. Kydex has a glossy side. Don't mark on the side. It's a nightmare. When you're actually cutting, you will lose track of where you drew that line. Mark on the dull side. This may mean that it's very common too that people want to have the dull side on the outside, not the glossy side. That's an aesthetic thing. So this may mean you may have some red marker on your Kydex. It doesn't look as cool. Sorry, I don't care. But don't mark on the glossy side. Thank me later. Another way to do this is you can actually score a line that you're going to cut later. I don't personally do that, but it's another way to get around it. I will do that with other projects I'm doing, but I may lay my template on there and just carefully draw with the razor blade. But I don't do that as much. I just don't feel it's necessary. I just use a marker, but I can get away with that. I can generally freehand it too. My preference is a red marker on black. Quick pro tip, black. A lot of people like to do all kinds of flashy colors. I remember a couple years back seeing somebody fight in white and just get picked apart because the judges can see everything. That's why we wear a lot of black in HEMA, because you don't see stuff, so black. I also suspect that black dye in plastics is more durable. That's why it's a little more common. I can't prove this from an engineering point of view, but I suspect, based on the other things I've done with other plastics, that there are chemical properties to other dyes that do not make a type of plastic as hard as it can be. So that's another reason why I prefer black, but can't prove that. I'm not sure an engineer would back me up on that one.
I've had similar experience with different Sculpey colors too, so I imagine it's...
Generally, the lighter the plastic, the easier it is to cut. If you buy the Japanese animation models like the Gundams and all that, a lighter colored plastic is easier to cut. A darker plastic is harder to cut. I'm sure there's different chemicals in there besides the dye going on, but I'd recommend black. So that's marking Kydex. As I mentioned before, you can also drill a bunch of tiny little holes. I've done that before. It's just tedious. I recommend just a red marker on it. Okay, action time. Finally, cutting Kydex. Before I get into cutting and getting some action, any questions about anything I've covered so far? Because we're about to finally get to the action, folks. All right. This is the part everybody came to see. How do you cut this stuff? As I said before, like this, I could probably get away with using shears right there. And I could probably also get away with using shears right there. And I could probably cut an angle here with shears, and here's here. But I've got this little odd angle for this piece I'm going to do. And what this does is this allows it to fit basically on my forearm and be tucked in right there. So this is why I prefer to use a Dremel tool to cut this. And I'll just find it's a little easier to play with. You could also use a scroll saw or a table saw. I don't have one. I'm going to get one eventually. I'm going to try it out, but I think I'll still probably just wind up using a Dremel. All right, so let's talk about cutting. So first things first, believe it or not, speed is your friend. The faster you spin a small tool like this, the more it will cooperate with you and it will not skip. What I mean by skipping is, as I'm going along cutting, if I'm at a lower speed, it might like run away on me, which can actually be dangerous. And I can also just go in the wrong direction. So higher speed is your friend. And I love this one because it allows me to dial the speed up. And this is gonna get loud real quick, folks, but I can actually take this guy from 5,000 RPMs, and just crank it on up. I like to crank this guy all the way up, honestly, because it just makes it, in my book, a little easier to control. My way that I do it, and this is how I hold the tool, what I like to do is make sure I've got 2 different rest points. I will actually generally work in jeans, and I will rest part of the plastic on my knee or something like that. In this case, I'm resting on the table where you can see it. But I'll have one rest point here of my hand holding the other end, and I'll have the Dremel in my hand just like this, where I can key it on and off, and I'll lay my knuckles the best I can on the sheet. And the reason I do that is it allows me to have a little bit better control. I do not want to just free float this in the air because I'm not going to have as good a control. So if possible, I like to have my knuckles on the surface that I'm cutting. Real quick pro tip, you're going to see it. I'm going to explain before I do it. What I like to do is I don't cut all the way to the ends of where I'm cutting. I cut between the points because that way it doesn't go flying off. Let me show you what I mean there. Oh, I'm sorry. And the other thing real quick, plunge cuts. This going from an end here, starting here at the end is actually kind of dangerous because you can skip down, it can skip up, and it can get caught, and there's a chance the wheel could explode on you if you're using it like some of those other wheels I was showing before. So what I prefer is a technique called plunge cutting. I turn it on, let it get up to speed, and then I lower it down onto the material. So if you can see here, I just started to do it, that little cut right there, I lower down onto the material, and I'm going to pass through the material. And I'll stop it right after I make this first little cut. So if you can see that, I've cut all the way through. I've not cut to the end. I've cut all the way through. And I'm going to continue doing that all the way down. From a safety point of view, it's better because the actual spindle of the wheel will prevent it from passing all the way through, as opposed to if I start here, I could jump through. So I like to do that because if I have an issue, the spindle will stop on the material. Do be careful. You want to have this a bit further out because this will rub on your material and you can actually scorch. If this is making contact as it spins, it can mess your material up. So pick an angle where you can hold this wheel at. Hold this far enough away from the material. So I'm going to zip on down the line here, and you're going to see this cut get made. Before I go on though, I just want to show this one thing. This is creating these little, it actually kind of heats the material, and it creates this little bits of plastic here. These can have little sharp edges, and you can't see it yet, but there is already, just from that cut, a little bit of fine particles here. In a moment, you're really going to notice it. In fact, let's see if my hands are clean now. Let's see what happens after I get
done. Did you have a
this.
question, Steve? I saw your hand go up.
Oh no, I was just checking the chat.
Cool.
Pause, and I'm going to adjust because I didn't like to see how my fan was kind of falling off there. I'm going to pause, and I'm going to adjust. Okay. Easy peasy, just like that. This stuff will scrape off pretty nicely, and this is why you have your tools for cleaning up later. I can just sort of pull this off, but this is a nice sharp edge. Be careful with it. And just from that one line, I don't know if you can see this on my table here, but this is how much particles I already have.
All your Kydex, yep.
Yep, so these tiny little particles are everywhere, and honestly, I'm probably sucking a little bit of this in, but I'm not doing a lot of cutting, so not too worried about it. But if I was cutting a lot of Kydex, I'd be a little more concerned. But this is a relatively small set of cuts. So same thing, what I'm going to demonstrate now is a tight corner like this. So this corner, it's already kind of off the edge. This corner goes over here. Let me show you how I attack that one. So same thing, I'm going to start away from the edge. I've got one finger sort of resting it on the material so I can kind of hold it stable. So that went to about there. Just going to turn it. Okay, I could have cut that all the way through, but I didn't want to, because all I have to do is that. That's a rough edge, but I've got tools I can clean this up later. But what I don't have to worry about is having, if I'd cut that all the way, it might have popped out of my hand. So I'd rather cut it in a way that I can just rip the last bit off, just like that, as opposed to cutting all the way through because I may lose control of the material. So it's a little bit easier way to get around a problem like that. All right, let's wrap this one up real quick because I need to get to the end. Uh-oh, a corner. What do? I turn. But John, that's not a neat round corner like you had before. You're right. I'm cutting outside the line, and I expect that I'm going to be doing some shaving, and remember the template was inside this red line. So I'm cutting basically on the line or outside of the red line so I don't lose that nice little organic shape I had. Now I've got this really lovely tight area through here. How do I get into there? I'm going to make multiple cuts. And that is basically a series of plunge cuts. With this tiny little wheel, I can get a more organic shape. Now, it's pretty close to being snapped here at the end. I'll look at ours already snapped. So I'm just going to go back to where I started. So I don't want to cut that one. And I can hold both bits of the stock here. Be mindful where you're cutting that you're not near your fingers, of course. There's my piece. Looks awful rough, but that's my piece right there. So again, I want to point this out. There's a lot of this stuff. This is, again, superheated Kydex. There's definitely, I can't smell it. There's definitely smell here in the air. And this is not a lot of cutting, but this is how much is on there, is in the air right now. If I was doing a lot more work, I would definitely want to be outdoors. I would generally do this kind of cutting outside, but I'm doing a class inside tonight. Also, by the way, be mindful when you're doing this. Don't get your loved ones pissed off at you for wrecking the kitchen table. I'm using a nice spare plastic table I have. I have a workbench I use, but I'm doing this class tonight on a spare workbench.
Can confirm it does have a noxious plastic smell when you start melting it.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And all I'm doing right now is I'm just sort of scraping off this stuff just so you can see how close I am to the red line. I'm mostly outside the red line. There it gets, you can see right there, it's sort of cut into it, but I'm outside the red line there. I've got these hard corners here, but we're going to deal with those in a second. Okay. All right, that's all I had to say about cutting Kydex. Again, you could do this with a pair of snips, but I am a lot more able to get this kind of shape here and additionally use less Kydex by cutting closer to my form. And my point there is, this is, for my book, a little more economical because this is some piece of 12-inch by 24-inch Kydex that I've gotten a lot of different pieces out of. And I just got one more out of it just now. So this allows me to be more economical with my material and not use too much. Okay, that was the most dramatic, important part. Everything past here is a little bit boring and dull, but it's the this is probably the most critical part, is getting to here. Heating is actually relatively easy. Everything I'm gonna do past this point is relatively easy, but cutting Kydex is probably one of the areas you want to be most careful with your effort and put the most time in. Everything past this, you can still ruin your work. I can totally melt it, burn it, drill a hole in the wrong spot. But this right here is generally what I found the most complicated part of the project. Any questions about anything you just saw?
Nope, makes sense so far.
Anybody? No, yeah. All right. So smoothing it. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I have a lot of little spots here that I don't like, that have got sharp little points that need to come off. Enter your handy-friendly clippers. It's going to save you a lot of time. So all I'm going to do, because this is an organic piece, it's got flowing lines. I'm just going to go to all these hard corners and take a little bit off each one. That's all I'm doing. Doesn't be perfect. I also got this little extra here I don't like. I don't want to have to try to sand that down, so I'm just going to clip that out of there. I don't like this hard corner. I'm at least going to get a nice little bit of a couple of 45-degree turns here. A little bit of extra there I don't like. I'm gonna go and smooth this out with these two just to save myself some time. Just I don't have to, so I can make that rounder a lot faster with this thing. This is actually, what, 3 cuts as opposed to sitting there trying to smooth it down with the blade. This is pretty good through here. I'm fine with that. I do not like that point because I do not want points on my organic materials. You may think that you would want to have your material line up so that it's got like hard corners. No, don't do that. Basically have rounded corners. This will prevent pinch points, and in my book, it makes the finished piece last longer and not wear down your armor as much. So I rounded that corner off, and I got this little guy sticking out here. That was where I sort of tore it away. I don't want that there. Go away. A little harder. All right, that came off. And a little there. That's it. So now I've got myself into a lot happier place, and I've got a nice, it's not great yet, but I've saved myself a lot of time just by cutting the edges off. Now this stage is where things get a little more tedious, a little more work. Like I said, you can use sandpaper. I'm not going to do that inside because it's going to create a lot more dust. You can use a razor blade, but here's my friend, my little carving friend that I use for doing models. Grab my hand, and I'm going to get one thumb on here, give myself extra leverage. I'm going to start on one side. I'm just going to work towards myself. I cannot cut myself with this. It's not going to happen. I'm not worried about it. I can cut myself with the Kydex though. So do be mindful of that. Again, I've cut myself so many times. If you're worried about it, wear gloves. I'm sorry, I've cut myself so many times, I don't care.
Accepting the risk.
Yes, the number of times I've cut my fingers open is pretty ridiculous. But I find that I have a lot better control just doing this by hand, by an unprotected hand. Now, one of the key things, as I said before, is Kydex will have hard edges on when it comes to you as a sheet, but after you've cut it, you also have hard edges. And those hard edges will become areas that will fray and mess up your thread, mess up your straps. It'll get caught more easily. So I'm gonna do this one side. That's a bad spot. I don't like
You have to do both sides. So like we'll do
Yes.
the dull side and then you have to flip it and do the shiny side.
Both sides are sharp right now. So
Okay.
I'm gonna go on this side. I don't like that. So I'm gonna save myself some time. I don't like you. You have a little problem area like that, snip it. Don't spend more time than you have to. Watching paint dry. All right, I don't like that area there, right there. So that is where I kind of gooned my cuts. And to save myself some time, I'm gonna lose a tool. Oh, there it is. I'm gonna go and kind of assess it and look at it. And this is where I'm gonna go ahead and shave it away with something a bit sharper. This is a common cutting technique. You actually have a lot more control than you think you would, but it's easy to run your thumb on. So please be mindful. There's a little bit of experience coming into this play right here, but it's actually a very safe technique. Done it a couple times. But bear in mind, you'll probably cut yourself a couple times before you get experienced. All right, corners like this are a little bit of a bear. Just kind of got to go at them a bit. Sometimes you got to change directions. And nice long straightaway. And like Marlene said, I'm gonna flip it over. Right quick. Do the other side. The key thing is because this is curved, it's just getting right in there and really hawking the material away.
So James asks if
Yes.
fine metal files will work for cleaning up these edges.
Yes, I just like this because I like the control. Metal file is absolutely, if it's what you got, use it. I just have found this little guy is absolutely a peach. And allows me to really, like these long straightaways like this, I can really just run down. Like I said, if I had a bunch of pieces I was doing, I would just go outside with a hand sander, and my mouse sander is a great thing to just really easy go over this, but because I'm doing this inside, I'm not going to do that. All right, a little more watching paint dry. And you can see all the extra material that's coming off here. I do not like that corner. So you don't want to have like little skipping, so do not like that. Let's go a little dig. I'm gonna go ahead and, as you watch me take my thumb open on live camera.
Well, you're slightly off camera, so we wouldn't be able to see it anyways.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, you can see the dig where it is.
So that's a, for y'all's benefit, I'm kind of rushing this. I would put a little more time in this, but honestly, where this piece is going to go, I'm not that worried about it. Additionally, what I've found is if I'm making a piece of Kydex that's kind of hidden and I'm not that worried about the beautification, I'm generally not going to care that much, largely because I just want to get the project done. But if you have a piece that you're like, maybe it's going to be visible and you really want to look nice and cool, some time into it. But for y'all's sake, just so I don't bore you to death with this part, I'm going to promise you this is good enough and not worried about it. And frankly, if I feel about it later, I'll go back and sand it later. Okay, so that's smoothing. I can run my finger on here. I don't have anything that is making me unhappy. A moment ago, I could not do that, but right now, there's no way I'm cutting myself on this. It's a little ripply because honestly, I rushed this, doing that for your all's sake, but I don't like that edge right there. A little more. That's better. Basically, I want to get to the point where I don't have a problem, you know, rolling my finger back and forth across the edge, because again, when you're putting this together and you get your final piece, these sharp edges will be problematic and will cause you to have problems with your other materials like your threads, your leathers, your jacket. Given enough time, it's going to fray your cloth. So you really want to make sure you take the time to smooth these edges down. And additionally, I mean, you could go to pick up your gear and then grab it, and then next thing you know, you've cut your hand somehow. So take the time to smooth your edges and go from there. That said, when you've heated up, you will actually round the edges a smidge. Heating causes the plastic to soften, and that will help some of these little imperfections to sort of soften out as well, and you won't notice them as much. So that's another reason why I'm generally a little more sloppy sometimes, like, whatever, I'm not doing this for retail, just to get it going and trying to save time. Okay, that was smoothing. Any questions next? Because now we come to the second most dramatic part, which is get some heat on this thing. Any questions about that part? Riveting. Awesome. Okay, heating. Before I do anything, I'm going to say this: do not drill a hole or cut a slot in your Kydex yet. If you drill a hole at this stage and you heat it and you bend it, it's going to warp that hole in ways you may not like. Do not make holes yet in your Kydex. Wait till the next step. It is harder to drill a hole in a curved surface, but do not do that until after you've heated it. All right, heating. I'm going to do my best to, actually, I'm going to try to show you the wrong way to heat stuff. I'm going to do on this bit of spare Kydex I don't care too much about, because I want to demonstrate one thing. All right, gloves. I will be putting gloves for this part. Where are your gloves? Come here, glove. Okay. The distance, if you can see this too well, basically I want to get this as close as I can, that if I were to get my hand in there momentarily, I'm not going to mind as much, because that's kind of a good range to feel that, you know, you're getting the right amount of heat in there. But real quick, I'm going to show you the wrong way to do this. I'm going to go ahead and get it really close to the heat, and I'm going to show you bad. I'm not going to get on fire, but I'm going to show you bad. So first, I'm going to get it to the point where I can bend. Let me just go ahead and get it so I can bend. All I'm doing is just sort of moving back and forth, again, so I can bend. So right now I can bend. But can you see what's happening there? Do you see that little spot right there by chance? Can you see the glossy spot right there? Marlene, is that showing up? Am I still on? Hello?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. So this is why you should not put this directly with to the face, the heat directly going in the face, because it's going to give you those scorch marks. Besides looking bad, I believe this actually degrades the integrity of the Kydex. Ultimately, it's a petroleum product. It relies on moisture, and if you take the moisture out through heat and you get it up here on the surface like this, you're decaying the plastic faster. So this is why you do not want to get it too close to the heat. I've had this away from the heat for a few moments, and it's still kind of pliant. Give it a couple more moments, still pretty pliant. And if I just let it sit for a bit, I'm gonna put this off to the side, you're gonna see it's gonna be nice and firm. But this is basically a very simple bent shape, but I didn't do it the right way. And I've also got this little glossy spot, and this is not what I actually want to have happen. So I've overheated it. So the right way to do it, which I'm going to do with this guy, is as follows. First of all, make sure your form is at hand. Whatever you're using as your form, have it close by. When I'm heating, I do not run the material so that the heat is hitting it directly perpendicular to the surface. I run it so that the heat is going on both sides of the material. And I'll just sort of turn it, and I'll turn the piece. The whole time I'm turning the piece, I'm letting the heat go on both sides of the piece. I'm being careful as I get close to these spots here. I don't do too close because I can scorch the edge. But as I said earlier, when you heat it up like this, you'll actually soften the edges up a bit more and make it a little more easier to deal with, and you'll take some of the sharp points out. And I don't know if you can tell, but it's already getting a little pliant. But because I need the whole thing pliant, I'm going to keep going, but I'm going to keep spinning it, turning. I'm going to go and flip it over because I want to make sure I don't have any glossy spots. This area is not getting quite compliant. Because I want this entire thing to flex and bend, I'm really going to heat it up. Oh, a little too close right there. A little bit of a scorch. It's going to happen. All right, that's getting better. Come on, buddy. Get hot. And it's better to go longer and slower than this than try to rush it, because you can basically just ruin your plastic. All right, I like that level of pliancy. I'm just gonna lay it down on my form. And all I'm going for is a simple arc. So I'm just gonna go ahead and lay it on my form and let it cool off. Give it a moment. Don't be too impatient. Good thing you got your gloves on. Just sit there and just hold it and feel it get cool in your hand. And once you feel like it's rigid, that's still a little pliant. I don't recommend trying to cool off too quickly either. Just let it air cool. I've tried things like dipping in the water and getting it on in the fridge because I was like rushing. I really wanted to get the project done. I don't think it's a good idea. Just be a little patient. Let it air cool. Let it cool off nice and slow and natural like. That's it. And there is my organically shaped piece of armor. That's going to be part of my arm guard system. This one, in conjunction with the other one, will go inside of my leather sleeve, and it'll all be held by the, Lord, sorry. It'll go into this rubber matting I've got, and I'll get some holes drilled in there, and I'll sew it in there. And the other one will be just a nice half arc. It's the same thing, it's just the opposite because this one goes on the other arm. That's it. So last bit, I'm not going to have you guys watch me drill holes. Drilling holes is not that hard, it's a hole, drill it. I recommend having something like maybe a piece of wood. You can put it on, you can set it on the wood, hold on the wood, and then drill into it, such as like this, and drill like that. But I'm not going to have you guys watch me drill holes it's a hole, drill it. That's why I have the Dremel tool. I'm sorry. I do want to show one thing because there is one thing about drilling holes I do want to demonstrate. So let's talk about that. Before I move on to holes, are there any questions about the heating that you just saw? If you look, I got a little too close to heat there, and that caused the edge to curl up. So I've actually made a bit of a hard edge. You can tell, but I'm actually catching my thumb there. I don't like that. So I'm
Can
gonna
you
go back.
reshape once you've heated it? Can you
Yeah.
reheat? and
You
reshape?
can reheat, reshape. You can do that repeatedly, but after a certain point, if you keep doing that, you are damaging the integrity of it. You're like right here at the edge. It's very glossy and shiny. Not that worried about it. I got a little bit of scorch mark right here. I kind of got a little too close there, but I do not want to lose this sort of dull luster because this tells me I've still got a good amount of moisture in there. But I do have a little bit of sharp edge there, and I'm just going to do a little bit of refining. And it's kind of hard to see on camera, but the process of heating does actually round the edges. If you do it the way I was showing, if you hold it towards the heat and allow that heat to go hit the edge and then go into the material, it will actually help sort of round the edges a little more for you. So you don't have to spend so much time shaving it. Like I used to spend hours like shave. You don't have to. The gun will do the work for you. So any questions about what you just saw there? Because I do want to talk about holes, and I've gone for a nice hour and a half already, and all I've done is like a piece of plastic. Anybody questions what you've seen so far? All right, making a hole, real easy. Take your Dremel bit. By the way, so there's more of your fine dust. And this is another thing too about your Dremel is it does have these little intake valves. So be aware that as you're doing this, you're getting fine particles into your Dremel tool, and you're hurting the lifespan of the thing. All right, I'm not sure what size drill bit this is. This is probably 1/8 of an inch. I'd pay 1/8 inch drill bit. I like this size. It's a nice beefy size. It makes it a lot easier to sew holes through. But I want to show one thing about sewing holes. And, so first thing, I'm just going to look at my other one where I decided to sew my holes. Like, they're there. Okay, yeah, right about there. I actually use a smaller drill bit on these, but I'm going to go use a big one just so you can see it on camera. But I did actually use a slightly smaller drill bit for these holes because I've got a little better at sewing through materials. But just so you can see it on camera, I'm going to go and do a bigger hole. So first thing I recommend doing, don't try to drill from the convex outside. Drill this way, or have it on, say, a piece of wood that you can drill down onto. But because I'm lazy and I can do this, again, kids don't do this at home, you don't want to set it on your table or your wooden surface, but I've got enough control I can do it by hand. But okay, that's a little close to the edge I want to, but because of the internal piece, I'm not that worried about it. That's actually kind of close to the edge. Kind of doinked that one. This is also a little bigger hole than I would normally drill, but honestly, because of the way I'm constructing this thing, I'm not that worried about this. I'm not worried about, if this was like an external hole I was drilling, I'd worry more about that, but not that worried that much here. When you drill a hole, same thing with the edges here. You want to smooth these out because it's going to fray your material. You also want to make sure your thread that you're going to sew doesn't get frayed as well. So take some kind of tool like your handy dandy, your handy dandy X-Acto knife. I find this to be problematic because it wants to dig in a little more than I want it to. So again, here's my little hobby tool. And I just go kind of gently but kind of firmly on both sides, and I'm rounding the plastic at either side of the hole so that when I'm sewing, I have a nicer, smoother surface that my thread will not blade against. I could use a Dremel bit. I have a Dremel bit that I can use to, like, get in there and, take some material out, but I don't recommend that. Do this by some kind of hand tool and be gentle, and just make sure you're taking the edge off so that when you're sewing, that thread is pulling across there. As the thread comes through there, it's not going to cause the thread to rupture. Like I said, I kind of dink that hole. I would probably want it to hold that way a bit, but I'm not that worried about it. And honestly, I could probably cover this with tape and it'll be safe. So
Could you
Yes.
You meant drilling on high or low speed?
High. Again, from a control point of view, I definitely recommend higher speed. Real quick on that, if you drill at a high speed but you apply light pressure, you will actually melt your Kydex. So make sure you've got a good drill bit, make sure whatever you're cutting with is nice and sharp, because if you get too much friction, you will melt your Kydex as opposed to cut it, and you will ruin your piece. So be mindful of your speed and the sharpness of your cutting or drilling implement. But that's it. That is a piece of Kydex. This took me an hour and a half to explain. I can generally do this entire thing in about 10 minutes if I just not talking to somebody. So this does not take this long. This only took this long because I talk so much. But that is basically the steps. And the steps in simplified order are design your project, get a really good idea what you want to do first, mark your Kydex, cut your Kydex, smooth it, form it with your heat, get your holes in there, then finally sew it all together. Use your needle and thread, use your synthetic sinew, use your elastic straps, and build your thing, whatever it is. And the thing I love about this project is just some of the cool aspects of this. This, once it's assembled, when this slides into here, and this goes on there, the friction of this rubber mat keeps it in place. And I don't have to sew this thing together. I can just run this bit of leather on. It's nice and tight. And additionally, this is kind of a headache. Sorry, folks. Let me get this on the right way. Oh yeah, there's a trick. Additionally, what I have is I've got a couple holes here, a couple holes here. I thread my shot cord through there, and then that attaches onto my elbow cup, just like that. I don't have to do any other sewing. So the sewing I have done on the inside is nice and protected. And this is not like, look what I can do. My point there is, these are the kind of things you want to consider. How can I build a thing in a way that it's going to stay together relatively simply, and it's going to stay together in a way that's durable and doesn't require a lot of really weird actions to make happen. By comparison, that thing was a nightmare. This is a complex mishmash of different things I did to try to make happen. And like, here's like, I've got this thing sewed onto the glove, and then it's going to attach here, and then it's like, no, stop. This actually failed a long time, and judges never noticed that I actually had a floppy bit here, and I was like fighting, just going at it. But this is actually a crap design because it's overly complicated. And this is what we see in any HEMA kit these days, is like, some very simple things, very complex things, and I'd argue that complex breaks. So look for simplicity in what you do and try to strategize how you do that. And be safe, enjoy Kydex, it's your friend. I know I talked a lot, I know there's a lot of details to it. It is really simple once you get all the things down and you have a couple of tools you like, and you've got a feel for how to play with the Kydex. This is a lot less complicated than everything I said. The extra words I use here to describe getting this point are mostly don't do this as opposed to do this. Mostly the words I use were trying to help you avoid some of the headaches I've gone through, going through things that are not necessary. But getting to this point is incredibly simple and easy. So that's it.
Also, before we fully wrap up, John, James was wondering if you would show how to cut a slot.
Oh,
on your
that's a good one.
overheated scrap.
Yeah, that's a good one. So absolutely, and the reason for that is things like this. This is a slot cut into the edge here, and this allows this this elastic to hold this on my arm. This is a great simple thing, and yeah, this is a stupid easy thing to do. Slots. So first thing, mark your slot. The thing with marking your slot is you want to basically mark it so that it's about the width of your material it's going to pass through. So level 10, this is my thing I'm going to use. And again, I would do this so this would be after I shaped my thing. I do not want to, you do not want to heat up a piece of Kydex after you've cut a slot, because that slot will, in fact, maybe I'll do that. I'll make the slot, then I'm going to show you what happens when you heat it up. It's just going to be a mess. Do not heat up a piece of Kydex after you've cut a slot in it. All right, so my slot is about yay wide. That's my width. So I'm just gonna freehand this. I'm gonna draw a couple of 2 flat lines. Now, I can do plunge cuts to get this out, but there's a really easy way to go about this. And instead of trying to plunge cut this out all the way, I'm gonna plunge cut, but to make it my job a lot easier and also make the slot work a lot better, I'm gonna drill it first. So again, don't do this at home, kids. I've got a little experience. I'm holding this in a way that I know is safe, but I would recommend having this locked down on a piece of wood for stability. But I'm going to drill holes at either end of this slot first. So I've bracketed my slot with 2 holes. I'm going to go back to my handy cutting wheel. Put that back in. And what am I going to do? Anybody?
Plunge cuts.
I'm going to plunge cut. Too easy. And I'll be very straight, I'm kind of doing this because I'm trying to hold an angle where you guys can see it on camera, but that's a little wider than I want it to be. I wanted to be a little straighter, but again, I'm trying to hold it at an angle where you can see in the camera. I would generally sort of hold like this and cut it, but I'm sort of holding it flat away from me. So again, there's some gooning going on here with some of my actions, but that's a lot easier way to get that material out of the way for cutting the slot. I will say though, that shaving a slot can be a little more problematic, a little headachy, like, this can take a little more time. I'm not going to bore you to this, clean this slot up, but slots will require a little more time and effort to clean up because it's not like I can draw the edge. And this would be my, my slot that this thing can pass through now. So if I was to make a strap that was going to hold on, I've got my armor held on by a strap. All right, let's talk about gooning this up, shall we? Why you do not drill a hole or cut a slot after you heat it up. I'm going to do this on purpose, but so pretend this was like flat and I want to heat this up. So I'm heating this guy up. I'm going to have a glove on. I'm usually lazy, I just wear one glove, but yeah, I have to hold this kind of certain way, so I'm going to put 2 gloves on. So I'm heating this up, heating it up, heating it up. Come on, buddy, get hot. Let's pretend that this is flat. I'm going to go to bend it. What's going to happen as I bend this material? What's going to happen to the slot?
It's going to distort.
It's going to distort, stretch open, and it's not going to be the way that you want it to be. So I'm just going to go ahead and goon it up on purpose, but essentially what's going to happen, if you can see this, but it's going to pinch open and it's going to expand open. You have a much wider slot than you really wanted to have. So my point there being, this is why we do not drill or cut before we heat. You get your shape, heat it up, form the shape, and then you make your holes. Because as you bend, that it's physics, that the material is going to purse open and out, and you've ruined the integrity of that piece of plastic, and now you've given it an area where as that heat allows it to push open and out, it's going to stretch out in a way you don't like. Metal, you can get away with that. Like I can make a hole in metal and then bend it generally, as long as it's a relatively thin gauge. But with Kydex, particularly with a slot, not so much with a hole, but particularly with a slot, but a hole will do this as well. If you bend it if you heat and bend after you've cut that slot, you will have just a crappy slot. So make your shape, get your shape smooth and all that, and then cut your slots, cut your holes, but after it's cooled off and after you're done heating it. Or you're just gonna hate yourself and like, ah, no, my piece, I made it was so awesome. Like this right here, that right there, if I were to heat that up, that hole so close, that's game over. It's a bad hole right there. But again, knowing where this is relative to the other holes I'm gonna drill, I'm actually gonna use smaller holes as we further in. They're gonna be holes here and here. I'm not that worried about this hole, but that's a gooned hole. That's not a good hole. My other holes in my other one are a lot further away from the edge relative to the size of the diameter.
Yep.
So it's close to the edge, but far enough away that it's not gooned up. Last pro tip for the night. If you're eating something, and this is why I was eating before I started the class, don't eat around this project. I don't know if you can see this, but I have pepper on my turkey. That's not pepper, that is Kydex sprinkles. That's why I was eating earlier. I left this one bit of cake here, and do not eat around this stuff if you're doing it this way. This is the last little safety tip I'm gonna leave for you, because you don't want to eat this stuff. It's not good. That's it. I know I talked a lot. If anybody really wants, I will share notes later. I don't really have this written down in a way that I can just like, here's a manual, go read it. It's just my notes, but I do have it in a way that's just like an outline, and it's got the steps in order. But if anybody ever wants to pick my brain on this, please feel free. I won't make things for you. Sorry. I'd much rather show you how to make a thing and then help you make that thing than make it for you, because that will enable you to go make your own thing and come back with like, oh, look at this thing, and then I'll steal your ideas. So that's my motivation, is to get more people doing this and see more ideas that are out there. And I got my ideas from looking at people like, Destroyer Mods and everybody else in the game that's doing this thing, and just going there and watching them in their process and really staring at what they do. And that's how we advance as a art, is we observe other people and we try to do ourselves, and we bring our own inventiveness to that part of the art, and we come up with something new. Otherwise, we don't evolve. So that's why I will not do things for you, but I will gladly show you how to do it. And then if you come back and say, hey, do it this way instead, I will gladly take that too. And that's it. Thank you all so much. Any questions?
Looks like Ashes. Ashes, I don't know if that's your real name or not. Has their hand up.
I was just going to say, have you checked out the MK4 glove yet?
Which one is this? Are we talking Pro Gauntlet, or are you probably talking something else?
No, it's a DIY glove build that you can find on.
Oh yeah, I've heard of this one. Yeah, no, I haven't stared at it, but I have heard about it. I think also
it's really good.
Yeah, I've heard some good things about it. I just haven't. I was getting into the whole like make my own glove thing a while back, but then I figured out how to modify a spez, and I'm like, no, I'm done with this. I'm actually very happy with my spez with a simple mod. Because it's light, but yeah, I've definitely heard some good things about the Mark IV. And if you saw Stuart Lacey,
yeah, it's, I definitely I've made some.
Good.
Yeah, no, I've made I made a gauntlet and such, but I based it very heavily off of his design. I've seen people who made his design who had no experience with this previously.
Yeah,
it's a really clear and clean design. And it feels like you're not wearing a gauntlet. Like I've tried his on. I tried Jeremy Suffolk's on personally.
Yeah.
And it feels like you're not wearing a glove.
Nice. I've seen pictures of it, but I have not had a chance to actually put my hand inside of it. It definitely looks pretty cool. I'm pretty sure I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, I just wanted to give you guys that heads up, because if you're doing a Kydex workshop, it's a doable project that requires very little mold making and form making. So you can mostly hand bend it on your initial shots.
Yeah, that's definitely a good reason to do something like that, because the best thing, particularly with a glove, is your ability to tinker and also go back and resize some things to fit you better. That's what I love about this, that you can go back and say, okay, well, I'm going to do that, but I'm going to shave a 1/4 inch here. I'm going to add a little bit of length there, or I'm going to tweak it there. That you give yourself in my opinion, a lot more fun kit, particularly because it's fitted to you. And particularly with forearm guards, there's quite a few ones in the market that you can get, and I've not seen a single forearm guard that fits a person straight out of the bag. They're generally too long or too short, for example. So this lets you, get stuff that is better for you, particularly it protects you better. Yeah, the Mark IV is definitely. I'm just too lazy to do that many pieces. Like I said, my Spez. I've been very happy with my Spez mod. It's too simple. Anybody else?
I got one for you.
Sir.
On the complex folds where you're doing more than one axis, I guess, do you do those all at once, or do you fold like one piece of it and then go back, let it cool, and then reheat to do it a second time?
Absolutely, it's the cool and reheat. So let's pretend this guy was going to be some kind of complex action. So I've heated him once, and I've got this curve in here, and now I want to go ahead and, I don't know, let's go the other way. So gloves on, totally viable. And this is where now you get into like the control part of the heat. You only want to heat a certain area. And the danger here is, particularly in a smaller piece, it's very easy to get the heat going into an area where you don't want to take a bend because you've got the bend where you want it. And this is where it gets tricky, but I can do it, and it's not that hard. The simple way to do it is don't expose that part to the heat. So I want to keep this bend down here. I'm going to keep it out of the heat. And so only this area up here is getting heated. I'm going to try to, you can see that too well. So here's my bend area. I'm going to keep that heat, but I want this area up here to go and take a bend. I'm going to keep turning it. And let's pretend I really want to get really complex with it. I'm going to turn it the other way. Let's just make some kind of a shape I would not actually make for anything, but let me just go ahead and do it. All right, that's nice and soft and pliant. So this is still hard. This is soft and pliant. So I can bend this, but I can't bend this. So now, and let's just pretend I wanted to do, I don't know, that's a thumb guard somehow. And right now this is kind of warm. You can't feel the heat through the camera, but if I wasn't wearing a glove, I'd be pretty uncomfortable. And as it is, holding this, I'm comfortable, but I can definitely feel the heat through the glove. I'm not in any kind of pain. I'm not particularly tough either. I'm not like let's stick my hand. Like, nope, I'm kind of a wimp. But I can absolutely right now manipulate this with my hand, and now I've got a complex shape. And the point there being, going back to Joe's question, I only heated the area that I wanted to get that other bend in, but I left this area cool, so it kept the bend that I, air quotes included, wanted to keep. So now I have a complex shape of sorts. And the best example I have of that is, again, my old tanky glove. Let me try to find complex bend. Yeah, I think probably a good example would be this area here. So this started off as a large flat piece. I did a bend here, and then I bent these two down, and it became, so heat 1 and then heat 2 to fold those two down into play.
A little
Can you slide that up
forward?
just a bit, Joe?
Sorry.
Or John, sorry.
On the camera, yeah. Forward just a touch. There we go.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing you have to really kind of see in person. This is, and here's an example too. I was saying, like, here's like the not so glossy area. Here's glossy. So I kind of example of like not keeping control of like what was glossy, not glossy. I actually wanted the ripple surface on the outside, and I screwed up, and I got the glossy surface out. So not glossy, glossy. So another odd thing that'll happen is you're shaving Kydex, you'll forget where you want to actually, how you actually want to cut the piece so it lays the way you want it to. And that's when you start getting more complex pieces, you can make these kind of mistakes. But yeah, totally viable. It just, again, this is what I said earlier about why I prefer a heat gun over an oven, because it allows me to control where I want the heat. But if I put this into an oven, the whole thing's getting heated up and it's all floppy at the same time. And if it's a large, simple curve, no problem. But if it's something that's complex, then yeah, I need to be a little more mindful of where the heat is. And the heat gun lets me do that a lot more easily. That's, again, going back to like the whole, hey, these are the shortcuts. Dremel tool, heat gun. In my book, I like these things the best because it helps me solve different problems that I'm going to run into as I craft my thing. Real quick word on vacuum forming. Definitely a thing. A lot of great vacuum forming going out there. I just don't do it. I know you can do a lot of cool stuff with vacuum forming. I'm just too lazy to build one, and they are kind of pricey. I've gotten just a good effect without buying a vacuum forming table. And if you don't know what that is, Google it, YouTube it. It's a pretty cool concept. It works very easily. But for my applications, it's overly complicated, and I can get complex shapes just by controlling where I apply the heat. Give me 1 second. I'm going to jump off camera. I want to grab one thing just to demonstrate that point. 1 second. Talk amongst yourselves. Okay, settle down. You guys are crazy. So this is my coif. I don't use this all the time, but it is a pretty simple design. It looks complex, but when you actually take it apart and you look at all the different things going on, it's actually a bunch of very simple folds. And the key one is actually this part right here. And it's hard to explain, but essentially, this is just one of those, like, I was thinking, like, how do I solve this problem? How do I make a piece that's going to be rigid flat like this, but also go down into a neck area? And it was pretty simple. I made an arc. Stuff underneath here. Made an arc. And then I cut into it. And then I applied heat here, 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 and here. And I bent those downward. And then I cut the ends off. And that became, if you look very carefully, you can see these cut lines. That became the rigid area that goes vertically downward in front of my neck. It's covered by a nice bit of foam, and it's covered by a secondary piece that is actually not Kydex. It's just a different type of plastic that's a little more flexible, but it allows it to bend and contour around my neck. And I didn't have to heat this. I just cut it, and it's good enough because it goes inside my jacket. But pointer being, this is a relatively complex set of cuts and heating actions, but in reality it's simple because it's the way you solve the problem with how you make the cuts and where you apply the heat. And it allows me to create a complex shape using simple cuts and simple heating. So my point there being, try to avoid doing a lot of heat and bend, heat and bend, because you can wind up making a thing that's kind of wacky. I will say though that, where is it at? Good Lord, I keep losing my stuff. Oh, that's what this is. It's very hard to see, but my thumb cover is a very small piece of Kydex, and it is some very complex shapes, and I'd have to like go find the template somewhere and break this one out, explain it, because it's this took a little bit of a mental gymnastics to figure this one out. But this is, like Joe just asked, this is a couple of different heat bends. But if you notice, it's very glossy, and that's because I had to keep reheating it to cause it to do what I wanted to. And it's kind of hard to see, but it actually is already fractured. It fractured pretty quickly after getting hit. And I'm pretty confident that's because I heated it so much and reheated, and that's why it lowered the integrity of the plastic, causing it to fracture sooner. This goes back to another point. Be mindful of how much heat you put in these things, because you will degrade the material and shorten its lifespan. I'm done talking. More questions?
In the interest of sharing ideas, are you interested in seeing the gauntlet that I ended up making?
If you get on camera, yeah. I always love seeing stuff.
Cool, let me get you on camera now. Okay. I surprised myself with looking forward. I was not attempting to do that. Let me fix that problem now. I am not a okay.
Technology.
Technology. How do I flip my camera?
Yeah, no, I've seen that one before. Yeah, those things are pretty awesome. Yeah.
Well, this is which one?
I know I've seen that design before. Those are, yeah, those are pretty awesome.
That's one that's, just give me a second. This is stupid. Becky, how do I flip my camera on Zoom?
Hi. Hi. Ashanti, I'm so glad you could make it.
Yeah, I'm glad I can make it to this too. Well, there it was.
There we go.
Okay. So yeah, this was kind of the MK4 glove a lot. This is a lot of the MK4 glove. It has a thumb plate that kind of slips. So the third plate just disappears behind the other two.
Right.
Which allows the thumb to just go away when it's raised. Let me just put it on. Which allows the thumb to basically go away when it raises. And
right.
then this design, and one of the things about this is it fits under a glove. Yeah, hold it for me. Is this fits under a glove. So all these plates are held down well because they're under a glove.
Right.
That's why they're so sloppy and floppy outside of the glove, which is the key element of making this work is it's stuffed into something. But essentially, yeah, I couldn't get these forms without vacuforming this fucker. Sorry. Without vacuforming this. Like this would not work unless I vacuformed it. And you're right. Like if you're doing a full heat in an oven or in a toaster oven, you need to vacuform your piece.
Right.
You can't do complex bends like that. Yeah. But yeah, this is essentially the concept. But if this didn't have a glove over top of it, that would be a thrust problem.
Right.
Like that would be a thrust problem. That would be a thrust problem. This could be ripped off by a thrust.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's. Let me turn my camera.
I think it's definitely the holy grail. The holy grail is the plastic glove that because we don't want to use metal because metal, quite frankly, is A, very loud, and B, is heavy, and C, it's like, well, just your harness fectin. This is where we're trying to stay close to Bloss fectin and have something that's mobile and light, but Kydex is not eternal, and this is where I actually like the Spez from a design point of view because it's a heavier plastic and it's a much more simple set of molding, and it also just lets you do certain things. But yeah, those things are awesome. That's a good job on those, by the way. That's really one of the better builds I've seen. I like I definitely like the job you did on the overall, the top across the knuckles. That's one of the more complex areas, and that's why I made that first glove and I went through 2 other iterations. I got them pretty well built, but then one day I'm like, wait a minute, if I just add this to the Spez, I'm fine. And that's why I'm done making gloves because from a time suck point of view, it's just it's a lot of effort, and I'm pretty confident I realize how much effort you put into those, and that's a lot of work. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's just but it's a lot of work. It really is.
It's about 5 years of work.
Yeah.
Here's it with the glove on it, since I have it and I can show you. So this is what the glove does. It just holds all the plates down. The motion is still the same, but the plates don't get moved up and get knocked off.
Right.
And I think that's the key with glove design and a lot of gear design is that you want, turn my camera off because technology. You want to cover it with some kind of a membrane that'll stop it from getting injured.
Right.
Like you did with your forearm guards.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where literally I looked at that. I was like, again, this is where going out and exploring other people's ideas. And I got that idea from the St. Mark gloves. Like, I'm just like, wait a minute, leather on the outside, what an idea. And then my mom gave me these, these rose printing gloves. I'm like, wait a minute, I have something here. And that's the big point, is taking inspiration from other people and getting more people doing this, because somebody's going to come up with the thing that's like, oh my God. I'm sure if I kept doing it, I'd come up with a cool thing. I'm just like, I'm lazy now. I like doing just enough to keep me fighting and not dumping some of the time I have in some of these projects, because I'd rather go do some of the other things like actually troll around. And if I can show other people how to do their own stuff, we'll get more cool ideas that we can plagiarize. No, thanks for sharing those. Those are definitely a great job. I will say, what I do like about those is they put the rivets on the inside, but I do worry about rivets near fingers. I barely trust the Spez rivets as it is, but rivets around hands are a tricky endeavor. And if you look at some metal gloves, gauntlets that are out there, you see some amazing articulation on these things, like some of the actual ones that were done back then, not the cheap knockoffs you see these days. And making connective systems around hands is an incredible art.
I can tell you two things that work really well. Webbing, nylon webbing, just take an awl, punch the nylon webbing, put the rivet through the nylon webbing. The nylon webbing does not tear. It has like a 3,000 pound breaking strength on it.
Yeah.
What the comfort fencing did wrong was they punched a hole in the nylon webbing with a punch that severed the fibers.
Oh, I would never kick the comfort fencing gauntlets out of bed, though. I'll tell you what. Saddest thing I learned after I saw those, like, they were making me more like, what? No.
Yeah. That's their major flaw. Their major flaw is just that they punched a hole in the webbing. Yeah. If you took the same comfort fencing gloves and punched a hole with an awl that didn't damage the material,
right,
the plates don't rip off. Like the first generation comfort fencings, I've been told, the plates don't rip off of. It's when they started mass producing them and punching holes in the webbing that the plates started ripping off. So it was an attempt to move faster that damaged the gloves that made them eventually fails.
Yeah.
The
Spez, if you look at the Spez gloves on the inside, they also have a webbing strap. And Joe, I can't remember, I don't think it was your glove. I think it was Brent Wang's glove. I think one of his rivets actually ripped out of the nylon straps that are on the inside. And yeah, that definitely tanky glove, but even that one can fail too. And it failed largely at a rivet. And that's why, again, I'm not a fan of rivets for what we do within BLOS, air quotes included BLOS-fectin, because they're right on this borderline of being really heavy duty, but not heavy duty enough that they will be more likely to fail.
And that's, just to add to that, one of the problems with the Spez Heavies is that they use polypropylene webbing, not nylon webbing.
Right, yeah.
And it's a much looser basket weave. So that basket weave
will just rip up.
It rips out easier. And then if you punch a hole in the basket weave, the way that I think they did, I think they sewed the fake leather, the faux leather on, and then punched a hole in the webbing itself, which of course makes it unravel. So like I use a tight woven, like a backpack, a standard backpack shoulder strap webbing. And I've never had a rivet rip out of that.
Nice.
But also I always have leather over top of them. So the likelihood of a sword catching a plate and tearing that plate off is really low. Like, you'd need a really specific situation to like tear a plate out of a leather glove that's covering it. And also the other thing is the rivets that are good are copper. The copper rivets are good because they're flat on the back. They have no height whatsoever. So like if you put a copper rivet in and you drive it nice and tight, it'll actually push the Kydex in a way where it's as flat as the webbing. So there's no copper rivet higher than the like webbing itself. In fact, sometimes it'll push into the webbing and be lower than the webbing.
Oh, that's good. I'll have to go check this out. Yeah.
Sorry if I'm over talking.
Oh no, just the craft exchange never ends. Quick blatant advertisement. We also have a group called CKDF Arts and Crafts, or HEMA Arts and Crafts. I forget. Good Lord. I just click it into my Facebook groups. And this is where we just post a lot of the different things we're working on. I post a lot. different things, and gladly would love to see other people post stuff there, because just sharing is caring is bottom line. So if anybody makes something after this class and wants to share it, please share it there. It's a great place to share that kind of stuff. Like the Mark IV, get some pictures up there.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I need to schedule it too, but at the end of this month, we're gonna do another craft and chat session where we all just like bring what we're working on and hang out.
Yeah, that was a good one. Do more of those.
Yep. Outstanding. I feel like we should do another one of these, John, where we do something more labor intensive instead of forearms. I don't know.
Okay, I'll teach you how to do it, then you can do the class. No, seriously, like that is the point. Like, I would challenge anybody to pick up the gauntlet, pun included, and take this the next step. Like, I can show you the next step where I sew stuff. Like, let's watch me sew. Like, let's go watch some paint dry too. But there are this is a relatively simple, after all the talking, that's an incredibly simple thing. I would challenge anybody, like, show us a process and walk us through your process. And if you got a different process, absolutely do something, show something different. But challenge accepted, Marlene. Let's see it.
Okay. No, that'd be cool though, because then I can check to see if the embossing gun works as far as.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Folding and stuff.
So yeah, what I would say is maybe a next session would be, okay, the Kydex piece is already cut. Let's talk about a very complex fold, like something that would appear on something like the Mark IV. Like, so how complex can we get? And I just did this, like, quick impromptu, but tell you what, I'll if someone wants to know, if someone wants to do this, here's a challenge. I will share with you the secret of my Spez thumb protector, and you can make one on camera. And you make the first one off camera because you got 2 thumbs. Make one and then make the other one. It's really simple. It's kind of scary how simple it is, but it seems complex, but it's actually very simple. But I think demonstrating that would be kind of a cool thing to watch.
Hey, John, when I saw it on your glove, it just looked like 2 pieces, basically one a curve that wraps around the side and then separate plate over the top.
Believe it or not, it's one piece of Kydex. So I take the original glove with its thumb protection, and it's one piece of Kydex folded in a very, not origami kind of way, but somewhat complexly. It's
okay.
one piece of Kydex.
No cuts, with no cuts in it to
oh, no, there's cuts.
It's in the like with the way you did with your neck guard.
It is a very complex cut, but it is a piece of Kydex. There are no slots. But I mean, you lay the piece of Kydex flat on the table, you would really have to like stretch your head and go like, what? It's one of those, after you fold it, you're like, oh wait, and then you do this, and like, next thing you know, you've got this thumb protector. But it is basically one piece of Kydex with just a very the best way I could describe it would be like a letter C, a very complex letter C. And going back to the, this is why I've got to use a Dremel tool, because I've got to do some very complex turning cuts to get this shape that I can then heat and get into. I'll tell you what, that's there it is again, just sort of, you can see it, just sort of look at it and try to imagine what's happening there. But when that thing is flat, it is basically a letter C. And when I put it on, it is nesting right inside of there. So when a sword blade comes in,
A little higher, John.
oh, sorry.
There
it is right there. Just like the ones that are manufactured now, except it's not that foam. This is a piece of Kydex. But it is actually, the best way I can describe it would be a letter C. Sports fans, it's been really fun. I really appreciate the questions. It really makes me feel good to get some questions like that. You like me. But it's been a lot of fun talking to y'all. I'm sorry I got to work tomorrow, and definitely get into my bedtime, but I definitely hope hope you all enjoyed this. And if, like I said, if you have any questions, please reach out, and I will gladly particularly share some of the more complex details like the items and all that. I'll give you a shopping list if you want. But thank you all so much.
Thanks for doing this, seriously, and thank you everybody who came out. This one was recorded, so we'll be getting this one up on our channel here in a little bit.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
This is
I've
really
got a
good.
bunch of Kydex, but I've yet to actually play with it.
Oh, give it a go, man. You will not regret it. It's a lot of fun.
And I have a heat gun, and I've got every tool that you've got, plus plenty more other than that weird scraper.
Thanks, John.
Thank you guys. I'll talk to y'all soon. Stay
Bye,
safe.
everybody.
Wash your hands.